All right. Well, welcome everybody to the July Darby and Cobbs Creek Community Science virtual gathering. I'm so excited to see you all here and ready to get it started. If for any reason my camera or audio freezes, pop it in the chat. Anna or Aurora can jump in and keep things going if I disappear. Um, So, just as a refresher, I'm pretty sure I know everybody on the call, but I'm Lauren McGrath. I'm the director of the Watershed Protection Program at Willistown Conservation Trust. And I'm one of the behind the scenes coordinators for the Darby and Cobbs Creek Community Science team. Um, and I'm joined tonight by our two absolutely pivotal volunteer and data coordinators, Anna and Aurora. If you ladies would like to introduce yourselves.
Sure. I'm Aurora Dizell. I'm the Watershed Conservation Manager at Darby Creek Valley Association, and I'm involved with community science and residential GSI, and I just love working with you all.
Oh, Anna, we can't hear you. Is this better? Oh, there you are.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, I think most of you know, I've met most of you already, but I'm Anna with Willistown. I'm conservation data and GIS specialist, so I work a lot on the back end with the data management of all the lovely data and photos that you submit.
Thanks, Anna. Um, cool. And then if it pleases the volunteers, I'd like to go around very briefly and do an introduction for everyone, all the volunteers on the call. So if we could do just your name, about when you joined the volunteer community science group, and then one fun fact, I think because it's July and about 135 degrees outside, maybe your favorite ice cream flavor, if you don't mind. Mine's butter pecan. Um, so Lloyd, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure, I'm Lloyd Cole, and my wife and I, Deirdre Gordon, are both volunteers. She's out tonight with some folks from her old workplace. I have no idea what her favorite ice cream flavor is, which is horrible, but mine is vanilla. Deirdre was one of the first volunteers. I've been serving as her assistant this whole time and have had a site myself for a few months.
Thanks, Lloyd. Pam, would you go next?
Sure. I can't see everybody on my screen. I'm just seeing your screen. But anyhow, so I'm Pam, and my husband's on the call too, Andy, and we do the work together. I think we joined at the pretty close to the very beginning, which is what, coming up on 2 years now? And
3 years.
3 years. Holy cow. Yeah, we've been out there a bit. My favorite ice cream, I like, if it's ice cream, I like it.
Perfect. Excellent answer. All right, Andy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, just unmuting. There we are. Hi. Yeah. As Pam said, we've been on now volunteering for about 3 years, and we're at the site DCHF2, which for those of regular geographic parlance is right off of Route 3 on Darby Creek, right close to where the Blue Route meets Route 3. And it's a very interesting spot, and we've discovered some unusual things in the time we've been there, but it feels good to be participating in something that's close to home and that has a real impact on the local environment, and yet is hidden in some ways, both physically and in other ways from most of the people that live in the area. It's kind of tucked away. But anyway, ice cream again. I like all kinds, but I guess my favorite probably would be probably chocolate chip.
Great. Thanks, Andy. All right, Miss Bonnie, would you like to do the honors?
Hi, I'm Bonnie Hallam, and I work with Heidi, who will come up soon, at the Murray Place site. And I've been doing, I think it's been 2 years, but every time is like the first time, we say. And my favorite ice cream, I guess, would be coffee, but it has to have hot fudge on it.
Delicious. Thank you. I guess since we're going in pairs, Heidi, would you jump in?
Sure. Heidi Haichu. I'm teamed up with Bonnie, and we go to the site she mentioned. And I think we're coming on 3 years, sometime maybe soon in the early part of next year. And for ice cream, it's going to be mint chocolate chip.
Fantastic. Thank you. Harry, I think you're next in the order on my screen.
Okay, so Harry, I am located at the corner of Yaden and Lansdowne and Darby. DCPP1. PP stands for Penn Pines, which is a park of Upper Darby, actually. I've been with you folks, I think, for 2 years. Lauren knows better than me. I do not claim favorites for ice cream. Anything will do at any time.
Wonderful. Thanks, Harry.
Yeah.
Susan Lee.
Hi, I'm Susan Lee. I have 2 sites along Newtown Road in Berwyn, and I have been sampling, I think, since October 2021. And my favorite ice cream is salted caramel truffle from Handel's. If you're up this way, Handel's has a lot of very unusual flavors, and they're all delicious. So try it.
Well, that sounds fancy and delightful. Man, I'm getting inspired by all of your ice cream flavors, by the way. So thank you all. Nancy. I think you might have just muted yourself.
Hi, my name is Nancy Garrick. I have been testing since sometime in the spring at Cobb's Creek in Philadelphia. And my favorite ice cream is vanilla soft serve.
Classic. Thank you. Miss Marianne?
Hi, everyone. I'm Marianne Sandone. I monitor the Fallcroft property that was gifted to the Darby Creek Valley Association. And I have right here an invitation. The DCVA is holding a 40th anniversary event at my site. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I wanted to share it. If you're interested, go on our website. It's from 12:30 to 3, September 21st. I think I've been doing this for like 2.5 years. I'm really not sure. And my favorite ice cream recently is peach. I had some at a ice cream store on State Street Media, and it's now my favorite flavor.
Ooh.
Thanks. Yeah, peach.
Peach sounds amazing. I love a good fruit flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And thanks, Marianne. We'll put that Fullcroft event in the next e-blast to all the volunteers. That'll be perfect. All right. And last but not least, Ivan.
Hi everyone, my name is Ivan Breshkov. I do the ECWP1 site in Springfield Township. very small stream. Um, been with the program since February, I believe. So remember the day I wore a training knee like yesterday. Um, and I actually have brought my new favorite ice cream, the horchata ice cream from Trader Joe's, which I bought yesterday on a whim, and it is wonderful.
Who I was just at Trader Joe's, so I might have to pick it up. It is that good?
Usually my go-to is the mochi, but it's it's good. It's not as there's like little cookie pieces in it, but they're not crunchy. They're like kind of softer. I wish it was a crunchier, but
All
it is
right.
very good.
Amazing. Well, thank you all. I am inspired and a little hungry. So thanks for indulging me with your favorite ice creams and kind of a trip down memory lane. I can't believe it's already been almost 3.5 years at this point that we've been doing this monitoring. And it's really exciting to have volunteers from all our OGs all the way back, March 2021, to some of our most recent volunteers to join our team. So thank you all for being here with us today. So let's take a deep dive into what comes next. We have some program updates, a little bit of housekeeping. So some of you may have noticed in the most recent e-blasts that our logo has shifted slightly. So we have formally added the Cobbs Creek into our logo name. And this came after some careful consideration. We were being a little inconsistent with how we were referencing the program name. And we had been, from the very beginning of the program, there was back and forth on whether or not we should be just the Darby Creek or the Darby and Cobbs Creek, because technically the Cobbs Creek is part of the greater Darby Creek watershed, but it is the largest tributary, contributing over 25% of the watershed into the Darby. But given the kind of history and differences in land use in the Cobbs Creek watershed, and the perception that the Cobbs is a entirely separate watershed than the Darby, we came to the decision that we should really call it out as a separate contributing but part of the watershed, to really acknowledge and be inclusive to the whole watershed. It's kind of a small piece, but it's a really important step towards our strategic vision for how we are moving through our monitoring program. And the Cobbs has been part of our monitoring effort from the very beginning. So it's going to be a tripping block for me. I have been struggling with that extra C, so I will beg forgiveness as I work on being as good as a gymnast as our US team at saying DCCCS. But I will probably be working on that for the next couple of years. So the reason this really came to a head is because we received generous funding from the For Imprint Company to purchase hats. So we had to actually finalize our logo so we could get it put onto swag for our volunteers. So it was a very exciting reason why we needed to sit down and actually be mindful and reflective of what our program is called and what we want it to look like going forward. So this hat is being modeled by Chompy the Beaver at the Russian Conservation Center. We are going to be giving out hats at our next in-person meeting, which is October 26th at the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge. So if you are able to make it, hopefully this hat is a good incentive to come to the meeting. If not, we will make sure that everyone gets a hat. I know that sometimes a Saturday meeting's challenging for folks. If you're in the area dropping off data sheets, picking up supplies, we have the hats, so we're more than happy to get you a hat ahead of time. One little thing, we really thought in the mock-up there would be a higher contrast between the embroidery and the hat itself. So for those of you with an artistic eye, you may have noticed that the logo's a little harder to see. We're hoping that as you wear it and you get a patina from being a hardcore volunteer out in nature, sweating, getting exposed to the elements, that it should start to have a higher contrast over time. So, but it looks really good in person, and we're really excited to finally be able to get you some cool equipment and celebrate all of your hard work. But it did trigger some really exciting conversations, kind of looking at how successful this program has been over the last 3 years. And some of these discussions did start at our last in-person meeting in April. And part of this has been looking at kind of where we're going as a program. And a piece of that is the development of a mission statement and a vision statement. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with this process, like I was, a mission statement is a formal summary of kind of who we are, who we are promising to be. And a vision statement is who we are working to become, our hopes and dreams, right? So the development of a mission statement and a vision statement is kind of a long-term process. And what is very important to us is that it remains true to who we were when each of our volunteers made the commitment to join the Darby and Cobbs Creek Community Science Program, and that we remain transparent with our volunteers as we're kind of going through this process, so it doesn't come as a surprise when one day you get on our website and there's a mission statement that we're taking all of a sudden a left turn into a whole new terrain. So we are going to be sharing lots of opportunities to provide feedback, if you want to be involved in meetings or discussions, there'll be ample opportunities at in-person gatherings, virtual gatherings. We really want to create spaces for our volunteers to be part of these processes. So the first step is we have a draft mission statement, which I'd like to share with you. It's quite simple so far. And it's to protect and improve the water quality and stream ecology of Darby and Cobbs Creek through community volunteer scientific monitoring and community engagement. I feel like it's fairly true. It's not too flowery. That's where we are right now. And then our draft vision statement, and don't worry, there's going to be a survey opportunity. So if you have thoughts and feedback, always there are survey opportunities to provide anonymous or non-anonymous feedback. Our vision statement is much loftier, which vision statements typically are, right? Because it's who we dream we can become. The highly regarded work of the DCCCS program will contribute to the local, state, and federal data sets regarding the health of the Darby and Cobbs Creek ecosystems, and in turn, representatives will be sought after to educate local communities and municipalities, informing their conservation and environmental initiatives within the Darby Creek watershed. So this is, I think, a much more long-term vision. However, I think, still realistic in terms of how we've grown in just 3.5 years. I think this is absolutely feasible for our long-term goals. So this is very much in early stages of development. The goal of creating these statements, they'll live on our website when we are working to look at grant opportunities, partnership opportunities. We'll refer back to these statements to make sure that we're staying within the agreements that we made within our community of volunteers. So we're not drifting well outside of what you all agreed to be part of. So we have a survey ready if you want to provide feedback on the two statements that we just shared. There's a QR code. The recording of this conversation will be shared as a YouTube link, and this survey link will also be included on there if you want to provide feedback then. All of the touchpoint emails will also have the link to this survey shared as well. You know how much I love a good Google survey. So we will be providing ample opportunities, like I said, to provide feedback. The goal is transparency. And I'm sure by the time December rolls around, the goal is to really have a mission statement to share and celebrate by the December potluck volunteer celebration. I'm sure you'll be tired of me sharing mission statements by that point. But hopefully we can all raise a glass of cheer and say we did it, and then we can move on into 2025, a more well-rounded organization. So thoughts, questions, or concerns on some of the housekeeping stuff? All right, cool. Well, now for the meat, what you actually came for, some of the data review and updates. So Anna, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Allow multiple sharing. Okay. Choosing the right one. All right. Hopefully you can all see what's going on here. I think. All right. So I'm just back with the data dashboard. I know we talked about it in our April meeting, but it's always fun to talk about. And today I think we were going to focus just on looking at some of the sites we do have in Cobbs Creek now that we're kind of explicitly stating it as a major focus of our program. I just wanted to take a minute and share some of the data that we have been collecting there. So currently we have 7 sites in Cobbs Creek. One of them is inactive. So we have 6 total sites that are actively collecting data, which is a good number. That's about a fifth of the total sites that we have. And our first sample in Cobbs Creek was in May of 2022. So we're going on just over 2 years of data in the Cobbs. And really what we're seeing there is pretty similar to what we see in the rest of the Darby Creek and all the other little tributaries where we're sampling. We see that in the summer, our temperatures are getting pretty high, well over that 20-degree mark. And in the winters, then we drop back down to a more normal temperature. If we look at some of the conductivity, we see that there is quite a bit of variation, but for the most part, unless it's really a rainy day, our sites are far above that 300 microsiemens per centimeter stress threshold, which for a system like Cobbs Creek is not that surprising. There's pretty high impervious surface cover, well over 20% at most sites. And so this, while this data isn't unexpected, it's still always good to have this information to be able to argue for change and improving our stormwater infrastructure and working towards better water quality. We also, looking at road salt, it's a very similar pattern to conductivity where it's well over the stress threshold most of the time, but sometimes drops down when it rains and you get a ton of water flowing in and it's diluting out some of the salt. So we're excited. I think we have a few more sites we're hoping to add in Cobbs Creek to fill in some of these smaller tributaries, more in the Wynwood area, and then maybe even further down on the main stem below where Naylor's Run comes in. So we're excited to learn more and just happy that we're more formally acknowledging the importance of the Cobbs to the whole watershed. So that's my quick update on the Cobbs. The dashboard is updated with all of the data that has been entered as of yesterday. So if anything looks funky here or you don't see any data that should be here, let me know and we can double check. And I'll anybody have any questions about the dashboard or anything? How to use it? Is it still, you still like it? Any changes you want to see? No. Cool. Well, in that case, I'll turn it back over to Lauren.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Lauren. 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 Thank you,
sharing.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, if you haven't played around with that dashboard, it is so amazing. I mess around with it a lot, and I feel like every time I do, I'm seeing more and more capabilities. So if you do play with it and have ideas of things you'd like to see, let us know, because Anna appears to be a wizard. Anything you dream, she can make happen. Within reason, but I haven't found reason's limit yet so far. So great. So now something that might be bittersweet for some people and celebratory for others, but we are retiring pH. So yes, I'm very happy about it. I hate these pH strips. But I know a lot of people have had issues with pH since the very beginning. However, we have been really sticking through doing all the pH testing because we just had a lot of these strips and we wanted to see if any important trends were popping up. So now we are almost through the nearly 2,000 strips that we had. And we are no longer going to be refilling pH. So what we're asking is that you continue to work through any strips that you have as you have been. So we want to pay respects to the remaining strips and use them up well. Please don't just throw them away. And then as you run out, just let us know and we'll make a note on our end. And then we'll bid them adieu and we'll move on to better, brighter, less challenging testing methods. How do you all feel about that? I know there are at least 2 people on the call that are not going to mourn the passing of the Pamphia pH strips.
So will these be replaced by a more sort of easier to read pH determination?
We are at this moment, we're not looking to replace them with pH. It does not appear that pH is actually that informative of a test metric for this watershed. But we are going to be replacing it with a different metric.
Which is?
Nitrate and nitrite. It's still color changing, but hopefully not as frustrating.
Unfortunately, strips similar to the chloride strips.
I
mean by hack, the hack.
It is by hack, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll get into it a little bit. So unfortunately for our price point, their color changing seems to be the method that most test kits use, which is challenging. But if we wanted to go into the more refined methodologies, then you can expect to add a 0 or 2 to each test kit price. So the pH the data we got from pH was helpful to show that we were staying well within the livable range consistently, which is what we wanted to see. So when you look at the data from March 2021 all the way through the most recent data set, it's beautiful. It's a flat line. Ranges from 6.5 to 7.5, and that is exactly what you want to see. And that's precisely where the pH is expected to be in this watershed for this region. pH is also monitored very closely by the USGS. So unlike chlorides, which was not necessarily monitored as widely, and it changes much more rapidly. So we made the determination that we can retire this metric and look at some of the other more rapidly changing water chemistry indices that are influenced more rapidly by kind of the terrestrial elements, as opposed to pH is really heavily influenced by like geology. That's fair. So we do have, Harry, I do have the test methodologies that you had recommended as a replacement for pH. I have those saved if we wanted to go back to this, to adding pH. I have that bookmarked. So it might not be a permanent retirement, but for now we're going to set it to the side and switch it up to look at this nitrite testing. So, yeah. All right. I'm happy that no one is too sad to say goodbye to Panthea. I mean, we still have a handful of strips, so if anyone did say that they were heartbroken to see it go, I could restock you a little bit, but I didn't think that'd be the case. But we're not purchasing anymore.
So, Lauren, I'm not heartbroken, but I did realize that I first used the pH strip in a home aquarium exactly 60 years ago. It's really not new technology. So I don't need a seventh decade of it. It's fine.
Lauren, are we going to be monitoring nitrate and nitrite?
Yes, they are on the same test strip.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a 2-for-1. It's the deal. So nitrate and nitrite are oftentimes tested together, and with good reason. So hopefully this doesn't really trigger anyone back into high school chemistry classes and too aggressive of a flashback. But if we're going to be talking about nitrate and nitrite, we do need to revisit the nitrogen cycle briefly. So the nitrogen cycle is a fairly complex cycle that is part of the water cycle and the soil cycle. It is really, really important for biological survival on planet Earth. So nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen is one of the most common compounds in our atmosphere. However, it is not biologically active. It needs to be transformed into different forms, right? Into ammonia or ammonium, and then into nitrate and nitrite to then become biologically active. And it gets transformed through a number of different pathways, through lightning, through nitrogen fixing by bacteria, through denitrification. Like it's a really complex cycle, and it's beautiful. If you really take the time to study it, it's really, really cool. And nitrate and nitrite are key pieces of that cycle that allow for life on planet Earth. And it's really key to understand that these two compounds, nitrate and nitrite, exist in a balance in our ecosystems. And when that balance is thrown off, if there's too much, we wind up in a bit of a pickle. So nitrate is the more common of the two compounds. It's NO3. And I apologize, I could not on Google Slides figure out how to make a subscript so that NO3, the 3 should be small. And nitrate is formed through the oxidation of nitrite by bacteria in the soil. And it's stable. And that's very important. So it's stable and it hangs out in the soil and it hangs out in the water and it's picked up by different plants and consumed and turned into different matter. It can build up in the soil and the water and become dangerous to human health. It leads to something called blue baby syndrome when it builds up in drinking water at high levels. So it's monitored by state and federal agencies. And like you really need to get it to very high levels for it to become toxic to infants. And the FDA swings in well in advance to start regulating drinking water well before blue baby syndrome can occur. So nitrate is stable and can be present at higher values than nitrite. Nitrite tends not to hang out for very long in the system because it's an intermediate. It's unstable. So in the nitrogen cycle, it typically happens during the transformation of ammonia. So when ammonia turns into nitrate, there's a middle step where nitrite forms. And the thing about nitrate is you don't need very much of it for it to be dangerous. So at lower concentrations, it can lead to similar impacts as nitrate. So because of that, it's considered more acutely toxic. With less nitrite, you can have more damage, but it takes very specific conditions to get nitrite buildup as opposed to nitrate buildup because it's always in transition. And it leads to very similar impacts. So this is a lot of kind of technical chemistry. But if you're into chemistry, it's really fascinating and it's a cool part of the nitrogen cycle. If you're into it, it's worth digging into. But because nitrite and nitrate are always present together, they're almost always monitored together. So when you're looking at testing kits, Harry, to your point, they're almost always measured at the same time. But because you can have high amounts of nitrite and low amounts of nitrate, low amounts of nitrite compared to nitrate that are still dangerous, you always want to know which is which causing which is which. So you'll have on the test kits we're looking at, it'll have 2 different pads that change 2 different colors, and there are 2 different ranges of like risk associated with both of them. So when we do our in-person training, we'll talk about kind of why the ranges are so different. But this is kind of that primer, that lead up, that you need very little nitrite to be dangerous in an aquarium setup, especially like your home aquarium. If you have nitrite buildup, there is you don't need much of it before it can lead to die off of your fishes. Compared to nitrate, you can let it build up a little bit higher before you need to do anything. In a stream system, almost always, if you're running into an issue, it's your nitrates. And when it starts to build up, you run into something we've all seen, which is eutrophication. So are we all together so far? Eutrophication, yes. So nitrate and nitrite, too much of either or both leads to an unhealthy overgrowth of plants and algae. It's almost always algae that is the problem. And so when you have too much algal growth, it leads to eutrophication. And so this is a picture from the headwaters of Darby Creek that was submitted by one of our volunteers, Gretchen Grobel, from earlier this year. And you can see this filamentous algae grew up so densely that the oxygen it was producing was getting caught under the filamentous algae itself and producing these bubbles. And so the overgrowth is so dense that the oxygen can't even escape. And then as that algae starts to die, it consumes all of the oxygen it produces and then all of the oxygen in the water and creates a dead zone. So it creates this really precipitous drop in oxygen in the waterway, and it suffocates everything in the creek. And so when you see in the news that there are these massive fish kills as a result of algal blooms, it's not always the algal growth, it's the algal death that causes the fish to die because they're suffocating. And that is awful in itself, but then there's also this secondary human health concern. where it's unsafe for the fishes, and it's also can create really unsafe conditions for humans as it starts to rot. It can produce bacterial growth, and it's unsafe for like kids and animals to be in or near the water, to be breathing the air near the water. Particularly down south in Lake Okeechobee, every summer there's issues with eutrophication causing like significant breathing issues in southern Florida. So nitrates and nitrites are important to understand kind of as part of this process of nutrient cycling in our waterways. Are we all together so far about why it's important to understand? Perfect. So now that I've scared you all to death about the nitrogen process, it is part of our natural system. So nitrates and nitrates are normal in our waterways. And especially we'll see increases in nitrates, particularly in the fall. So as autumn progresses and we see all of the leaves start to come down and fall into the streams, and a beautiful leaf pack build up, and then the biofilm starts to build up and our leaves start to break down and insects are breaking them down. It's a really critical part of our stream ecosystem because those leaf packs provide the food for the insects that overwinter in the stream to survive through the winter. And it's through that natural breakdown of the leaf litter that nitrogen cycling continues in the stream over time. So it's a slow buildup and cycling in the waterway. However, when you start to throw in some human components like fertilizer application on the landscape, then you can get these massive influxes of nitrate into the system. So particularly inappropriate applications of fertilizers, like right before a rainstorm, can cause really intense influxes of this, what should be kind of a limiting or low concentration nutrient into the system really fast. So if you put fertilizer in your yard, on your farm, on a golf course, and then it rains, the investment of that fertilizer washes right into the creek, and then it can cause that sort of rapid growth of algae. And nitrates can also enter the waterway directly through human and animal waste. So one of the most distressing ways is if you have a leaky, poorly maintained septic system. That is a way for these compounds to enter the waterways. Sewer systems, if they are leaking or if they're part of a CSO, a combined sewer overflow system, which is an issue in the Cobbs Creek. During big storm events, that is a way for waste to enter directly into our waterways. And animals also direct deposit. So messy animals like cows and horses that are not restricted from waterways, if there are manure piles that are not properly contained away from waterways that have runoff issues, and wildlife, things like deer, or as we all know, geese, definitely apply directly into our waterways. And that can also provide nitrates and nitrites directly into the system. So there are all of these different influences from our landscape, some that are natural, like geese and leaf litter, and some which are absolutely from humans, like fertilizing our yards and our golf courses. We are looking to start sampling, and we received a generous donation that has allowed us to purchase sample kits for so far about half of the sites in our community science program. So we're currently looking for volunteers who would like to get trained up on this. We know that not everyone might be interested in learning a new protocol right now, but we're hoping most people would like to. And And our goal, we're working on securing additional grants to get the funding to expand this across the entire watershed. So what's really cool is we do have some baseline data. At Willistown Conservation Trust, we have been doing monthly water chemistry monitoring, and we have quarterly nitrate data extending all the way back to January of 2018. And what we see is there is some seasonal pattern. Unfortunately, for all of this data, only one site is in Darby Creek. And that doesn't tell a very good story. And it doesn't give us all that much information about what's going on. So we're hoping that we can really get a better understanding of what's going on throughout the entire watershed. Beyond this, it's just this kind of pinkish site, and it's low, actually. It's one of the lower sites throughout all of our sampling at the Darby Creek. So we're curious to learn more about what's going on and to see, because the Darby and Cobbs Creek have a really interesting variety of landscape uses. There are golf courses, there are high intensity developments, there are open spaces. There's a lot of really cool things going on. And understanding how the dynamic of, these compounds are working and transforming over the course of the watershed will be really interesting, and combined with the chloride data, I think will help us both to understand how the ecosystem is functioning and hopefully allow us to make more targeted recommendations specifically towards hopefully some of the larger landowners that maybe are making decisions that they don't know are impacting downstream ecosystems and people. So for some context, this is what the strips look like. There are two little pads, and the protocol itself is pretty straightforward. You just dip it into the water for about 1 second, and then you put it pad side up for 30 seconds and allow the colors to change, and then you compare it to the color chart. So rather than tell you about it, Susan Lee has been our guinea pig, and she's been running this. So Susan, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with this new color changing protocol?
Sure. It's pretty easy. So Lauren just went through the protocol. For me, the nitrite has always been 0, so that's been really easy. It just hasn't changed at all. And the nitrate, I have a couple of sites, and they have been between 1 and 2. There was one sample where it seemed to be getting a little bit darker than the 2 color, but it is pretty straightforward. And I don't know, Lauren, if you want to make any comment about, if we are testing, it seems to be a little darker than 2, we just count it as a 2, or make a note and count it as a 2. I don't know exactly how you want to handle that, but as I said, it's been pretty straightforward. It's a little bit easier than the pH because they're not, a lot of different color blocks to be trying to match up to.
Yeah, I think we're gonna treat it similar to the chloride strips, where it has to pass like we don't want to be estimating. But you'll notice that it does go from like 2, 5, 10, 20, 50. So just as we have been with everything, we'll be taking pictures and validating. Great news though, for everyone who hated the scanned, laminated, kind of inconsistent colors of the scanned sheets, you will be receiving the entire bottle with everything in it. So we are not going to be aliquoting or creating smaller subsets to send out. You get an entire bottle it's just yours. And what we've been learning from other people who are using this protocol is that the color is so sensitive to each lot that it is really important that you don't try and switch it up. So the way Susan took this picture, I think that's how we're going to ask everyone to do it, like on a, oh, go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I did start putting it vertical because like the darker of this strip, the darker pink is the top is the nitrate reading, and the one that's just completely white is the nitrogen. But you see on the bottle how they are, sort of encouraging you to place it vertically. So I did start on some other photographs putting the strip vertically next to the bottle just so it was a little bit easier to line up. So it's an option, I guess.
Yeah. But I think on the white background to get the white, like the color, the average color. Pam, I know I'm doing a terrible job trying to describe the, oh, shoot. Now we're running into late night Lauren that's running out of nouns. But to get all of the colors averaged together. So not holding the strip out in space and the bottle out in space and trying to have a picture with a generic or with the varied background, what I'm trying to say. But we will be walking through all of this together at the in-person meeting. So if you are interested, on October 26th, this is your second carrot. You'll get a hat, you'll get trained, you'll get new stuff to put in your kit. And then the first nitrogen testing will be for the November sample collection. And if you are really interested and want to add this parameter but can't make it to the October in-person gathering, don't fear, we'll find a time to meet and we'll run through the exact same protocols together so you can still roll out with the rest of the volunteers who are going to be using this same protocol. And you can still have your hat. We won't penalize you for not coming to the in-person meeting. So does all of that make sense and sound fair? Okay. Any thoughts, questions, or concerns? Fantastic.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted. What is considered healthiest? What would be the ideal on this test?
Oh, yes, ideal. That's a great question. So nitrites would be like 0. We don't want to see anything popping up on nitrites. It should always be trace. So these tests should not be sensitive enough to pick that up. Nitrates, I believe, should be less than 10 milligrams per, I think anything above 10 milligrams per liter is considered unhealthy, like for humans, like dangerous. And then below 1 milligram per liter would be anticipated low human impact on the stream. So we would want to see somewhere below 2. I would expect below 2. 1 to 2, I would think. I'll have a better answer in October.
Okay.
So Lauren, you don't want to see any interpolation of the results from the strips. You just want to see the numbers that appear under the color, and we evaluate by use the closest color is the number that we report. Is that the closest color? No
Yes.
estimating interpolation.
No estimating or interpolation. However, so on your data sheet, if this is 2, you think it's 2, write down 2. But if it's like darker than 2 but lighter than 5, you can write in the notes that like I noted that it was much darker than 2, but it was not quite as light as 5. We will record it as 2, but it, in the notes, you can always note that. But we're going to treat it the same as we do as the chloride strips, that it has to cross that boundary, right? That it has to cross the hash mark of the color of it's a dark, at least as dark as 2. But this is where it's the color thing is tricky. Yeah. But we're not going to say it's darker than 2 but lighter than 5, so therefore I'm calling it 3.5, you know.
So if it's darker than 2 but lighter than 5, it's reported as 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can in the notes say, you know, it was much darker than 2, however, not as light as 5. Therefore recorded as 2. See the picture for further color. And sometimes that's just how the data is. But if we can't say for sure what the number is, aside from it is at least 2, then we can't say for sure what it is. So it's the tricky part of this kind of affordable science, unfortunately. Yeah, great questions. All right. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns on nitrite so far? All right, then we'll get into the philosophical piece, life and questions of Darby Creek. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions with your RSVP. First off, I just really wanted to acknowledge that every month, the pictures that volunteers submit, we go through and we love it. I don't know if it's intentional, but many of you submit gorgeous, artistic, beautiful pictures of your sites. And we really love going through them. And we have been trying to think of different ways to celebrate the kind of like your site through your eyes. So we will be featuring more like vignettes for like the touchpoint emails and monthly emails that we send out, because there are some really incredible pictures. So as we're kind of going through the questions that y'all submitted, I encourage you to enjoy some of the photographs that have been shared, including starting with these 2 lovely mallard ducks from Jesse Hart at his site. So there were a lot of great questions actually submitted. I grouped some of them that were similar. So the first question partnered with this lovely female ebony jewelweed damselfly submitted by Susan Lee. Since our testing inception, has water gotten noticeably better or worse, and in what way? And what are we finding out about our watershed? So 2 wonderful questions from 2 different volunteers. The first, I have kind of an opaque answer for, which I know is very frustrating to hear. But the truth of water chemistry monitoring, even though it is considered high frequency, we go out every month, which is really, really frequently for a water chemistry protocol. It takes at least 5 years of data collection to understand what's going on at a site. And that feels like such a long time. But when we think about the fact that August, let's see, it's the next sample window is in August. Let's see, so August 2022 was Hurricane Ida, and then August 2023 was a drought. August 2024 is a drought. August 2025 is probably, it might flood again. So if we think if each one of those sample windows is just one piece, then we have 5 different months that we look at for 5 different Augusts. And we have to look at those different pieces together an average kind of to see what the variability for August is at your site. And so it's over those 5 Augusts that we can understand what an average August is. And that is great, except that's 5 years of Augusts. So it's really tricky to know for sure what an average March looks like or an average September without being at a site for a long time, even though we're there consistently every 4 weeks looking at the same site. So what we know is that we have seen 3.5 different years at each of our sites. So our oldest sites, we have definitely seen some really intense variability from year to year at our different sampling periods. And we have seen some really incredible resiliency at all of our sites. I think that's the most important thing that we've learned. From top to bottom, the entire Darby and Cobbs Creek watershed, from every site that's considered good to considered bad, is chock full of life that continues to thrive on good days and bad days. And I think that's the most important thing we're learning. And that life extends from insects to humans to birds to, I mean, Harry Kalish, you had an alligator in your creek last year, if I remember correctly. Like we have, wasn't that the alligator in Eden that the police were called for last summer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that sighting was ever confirmed, but it must have been a pet. If it was an alligator,
I hope it was. I know it was only seen once, but we have while we can't say based on the data if the waterways have gotten better or worse yet, we have been learning about the resilience of the watershed. And I think that's the most important thing to hold on to. We've learned a lot about what wildlife lives there, that we have a population of freshwater mussel, breeding freshwater mussels in the headwaters that we didn't know existed, that we have tons of waterfowl that call the entire watershed home. And I think that all of those pieces are worth learning about and celebrating kind of as we continue to work towards that 5-year mark, which is when we can start to say, yes, we're seeing improvements or we're seeing degradation. We're also sitting on this precipice kind of watershed wide where there are these coalitions of groups that are working to install improvements. So in the lower watershed, there are engineers working to put in rain gardens, to put in remediation and improvements. And, you know, one of the biggest things we can hope for is that with our community science monitoring, that we might capture some of the benefits of the work of those groups. Even though it's not our goal, it might be one of the kind of aftershocks that because we've been here and we've been working, we might see some of those impacts. So it's a loosey-goosey, unsatisfactory answer because it's a long-term project. But it's a great question. And I hope you keep answering it so I can keep coming up with better answers over time. Like, yeah, we've been doing this for 5 years and things are looking good. And Anna can answer it with a beautiful data dashboard display. So that was a good question. So any thoughts before I move on to the next volunteer submitted question? All right, and these, oh yeah, I've already answered all these questions. Yes, we're absolutely adding more testing. You know all about it. We're rolling out the new testing. We'll be doing it in November, and you all will be well-trained rock stars doing our nitrate testing. And this is Corbicula. Aurora submitted this picture. This is the ribbed Asiatic clam, and you can still see it's got a little, this guy was eaten by something else, and there's still a little bit of meat in the shell. Okay. This is a really good question. At my site, the stream changes a lot. is there any benefit or plans to control the stream so that pockets of water do not continue to get trapped when the stream water is low? So, I think Marianne submitted this question, and unfortunately she hopped off the call. The answer to this is a resounding, I don't think so. So, unfortunately, Darby Creek is not a drinking water source. If it were, very likely there would be some kind of reservoir along its body that would be used to continue to flush the lower part of the watershed. So if there was a drought and water levels dropped, you could let the reservoir flow out to continue the water level, like keep the stream flowing, so that intakes at lower parts of the watershed could continue to pull water out as a drinking water resource. But because Darby Creek is not a drinking water source, there isn't any kind of infrastructure like that. So there isn't any benefit or plan to control the flow in the lower portion of the watershed. My guess would be that the concern is that when droughts hit and flow causes stagnation and like pockets of water to form, that you get mosquitoes and pests like gnats. The issue is that Darby is fed by groundwater, and when that water table drops, you don't get a lot of flow. You get that ponding. My recommendation would be encourage predator insects. You want damselflies and dragonflies. An individual dragonfly will eat 1,000 mosquitoes a day.
Whoa.
Encourage them. The problem is that Mosquito Joe gets called when mosquito populations surge. And mosquitoes are prolific breeders. And they are resilient. So Mosquito Joe comes and sprays. And what happens is the larvae of mosquitoes are becoming resilient against the herbicide or the pesticides that are being used. But dragonfly and damselfly larvae and other predatory insect larvae are longer lived than mosquitoes, who have very short generational periods. They die, the mosquitoes live, and then you have to keep upping the pesticide intensity. And so there's this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy that, and no offense to Mosquito Joe, I just see his signs around here a lot, but all of these pesticide companies keep coming out and keep treating and like keeping themselves in business. There are other methods that you can use that are non-lethal, but if you're treating for one insect pest using chemical methods, you're killing everything else as well. It's not selective. So my preference is always to encourage those pest eaters. Damselflies and dragonflies, they're beautiful and they are vicious, and they avoid you with glee. They will eat your pest problem. So that's my recommendation. No one is going to be engineering more flow to Darby Creek. It seems like everyone is really engineering the opposite right now. So, and this is a beautiful little baby skunk cabbage submitted by Charlie Coulter from this spring. Questions about stream flow? All right. Alrighty. And then Harry, I think this is your question. Short and long-term anthropomorphic impacts on streams, such as, but not exclusively, the removal of rocks in stream bed or from stream beds and shoreline to form dams for deeper body immersion and deposition of various and sundry discarded debris, is an extensive public education program in order. So let me know if I'm rephrasing this properly. Building swimming holes using rocks from the dam and the stream bed, and then throwing a party and leaving all your trash as the problem? Is that
Trash is a serious problem. You probably know more about how serious it is, but it seems to me maybe DCBA or your people or somebody might promote a public education program, especially aimed at folks who use the creek in the summer for recreational purposes, such as bathing. But there's so much trash. It's unbelievable. Um, Education, I think, is the answer. Um, I've been working on people, one by one, and there are some people who actually are quite receptive to please PLEAS and PLEASE to if you bring it in, take it out, carting out trash. Some people are receptive, others are resistant, but I imagine that a time when possibly there could be a contagion of removing the trash that you take in.
Yeah, I don't know, Aurora, I know DCVA does an amazing job in April of doing stream cleanup work. But is there anything happening in terms of education work or outreach or pamphlets or anything in terms of outside of the stream cleanup efforts?
At the moment, not that I'm aware of. Like if people on occasion will reach out to us and ask for cleanup supplies outside of our typical annual spring cleanup, we're usually more than happy to supply them with the supplies, and they can take their own group out and kind of like informally do a cleanup outside of our big, huge sponsored events. But as far as education, I mean, we had some education back when we were doing a lot more webinars. We've kind of moved away from webinars recently. I think people were tired of them. Yeah, so this particular year, there's a lot of focus on other things because it's our 40th anniversary year. So our events are kind of modeled around that. But yeah, I certainly think we could do always a better job of educating. And I can pass that information on to our new administrative guy, Kyle. But I do have a feeling we have a lot of things in the pipeline other than that at the moment. So it was a long answer to say no.
Yeah, and I know, Harry, this isn't just a Darby Creek problem. I've been seeing,
Right.
especially this summer has been so hot and so dry that there's been more and more bathers just seeking refuge in every body of water. That it seems like I've seen more and more signs posted everywhere, like carry in, carry out, and reminding folks to be respectful. So I think it's something for us to think about as a group. I don't know if we're necessarily the organization to lead an extensive public education program, but I think that we're in a position that we can definitely be amplifying what other people are doing. And we should be, I think we can be thinking really critically about what our role is in this and how we can be spreading messaging like effectively. I'm not sure what the answer is necessarily.
I can see a consortium of environmentally concerned groups making a concerted effort together to reach people who frequent the streams and toss trash.
Yeah, and have you reached out to Friends of John Hines? Because that's a group I've seen really, really active on the litter side of things, because John Hines really they get the litter from upstream from Darby and Cobb's, and then also from the tidal side of things too. So Carol Armstrong is the person I see most active from Friends of John Hines. She might be a good person to touch base with because she was doing a micro and macro plastic monitoring program. And I feel like she's just on top of a lot of community action work. So
And
it
works as a volunteer, correct?
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the Cobb's Creek has an extensive volunteer organization that removes trash, and they do sort of once a year they have an educational thing, not necessarily just to not not to litter, but to also to these are native plants. This is water testing that's going on here. This is, just to kind of get people involved and realize this is their park and they need to take care of it. It's kind of like indirect messaging, not direct, but they do publish how much litter they remove. And since they have started removing it, it looks so much better. And one of the leaders of the volunteer groups told me that they think there is less littering going on. So, but that's like, I mean, I'm floored by the dedication of the people who head that up. And the amount of volunteers that they've been able to enlist to do that. It's taken a lot of volunteers.
So is that the Cobbs Creek Environmental Education Center?
No, it's called the Cobbs Creek Ambassadors. It's headed up by a man named Rich Gufanti. And he has broken the trail up into sections. And each section has a person who sponsors cleanup once a month on that section.
Well, that's an amazing model, Nancy. And Harry, that sounds like something that maybe we could follow up on. Rich Gafanti, Nancy, if you could, let's maybe the three of us circle up together and see if we can make some connections. Because Harry, that might be a great group to touch base with, and make some meaningful, I don't know, build some bridges there, I think. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any final thoughts on littering? All right, next question. Less of a question, more of a statement. Thanks, Lloyd. Want to learn more about mussels, river otters, and insects? Very happy to share that we are likely guaranteed to learn a lot more about mussels at the in-person meeting. So as I insinuated, we learned a lot about mussels in May. So we were joined by Eric Sildor from the Delaware Riverkeeper Network to conduct a formal mussel survey on the new mussel bed that was discovered in the headwaters of Darby Creek. And I know Eric quite well. I used to work with him when I worked at the Delaware River Basin Commission. And I told him there were loads of mussels. And he thought I meant like a couple dozen mussels. And the final count was 853 mussels, 2 species, and evidence of breeding in the last couple years. So turns out there are loads of mussels. So it was really exciting. And he has our in-person gathering date bookmarked. He's going to do his best to be there. His calendar is always very crazy. So the goal is that he's going to present kind of on the value and importance of freshwater mussels to the volunteers. since we're all going to be together and just based on how wonderful Alan Samuel was at our last in-person meeting, y'all hear from me too much. So we want to really bring in some experts to talk on the field. So we will be learning a lot more about mussels. Hopefully river otters won't be far behind. And of course, insects forever, happily. So yes. And then I saw in the chat, is it safe to swim in the Darby Creek? Bonnie, what a question. That's the $1,000,000 question. I would say yes. In the upper portions of the Darby Creek, for that mussel survey, I was snorkeling. I had my head underwater. I drank more of it than I should have, and I'm here with no stomach bugs, happily reporting. However, in lower portions of the watershed, I would not put my head underwater, particularly during low flow periods. And that is because of the risk of bacteria. So in the lower portions of the watershed, there where you're not allowed to take fish that you catch, where it's recommended you don't eat the fish that you catch, and where there are reports of a disease called black spot on the fishes, that's usually a result of high bacteria counts in the water. Where there's high bacteria counts, there's higher risk of like stomach bugs as a result of drinking the water if you like dive in. Had I not needed to shove my head under the water to count mussels, I would not have willingly put my head under the water in the headwaters of Darby Creek either. But I live to tell the tale. So, and when there are a lot of sensitive species like a mussel, it's less likely that there is something funky happening. However, for soaking your feet, wading in the water, if you don't have open wounds, like you can hang out in the water, I think fairly safely. But if you're immunocompromised, if you're planning on, doing a cannonball into it, I might advise caution. So
I ask sort of as a follow-up to the other conversation. It's been so hot, and there have been a lot of people who've been going into Darby Creek up where we are, and they've started having police chase people out of the water. In one way, I feel kind of sad about that, because where else would a lot of these people find relief from the heat in some cases? And on the other, I want to make sure that it's safe for them to be in there as well. So if I ever have to talk about this to the people in the township that have knowledge about that.
Mm-hmm. It is, there are a number of groups who are working on establishing community science bacteria monitoring protocols, which is phenomenal. It is so complicated, just logistically, because so we have a 4-day window for monitoring, which is great. It provides flexibility. It's wonderful. Bacteria, you have 4 hours, 4 to 6 hours from stream to lab where it has to be analyzed. You got to get it in a petri dish for the test to begin. So we looked at it briefly at the beginning of this, because I was like, that would be so cool and so helpful, especially in the summertime, to be able to say like, yeah, it's safe or absolutely not. You might wind up very, very ill if you go swimming. But yeah, logistically, it is a nightmare to try to get so many sites analyzed. But there are groups working on that specifically for that issue, that for many, many people, it's the only place that they can get comfort and a reprieve. And plus, it's beautiful. And I would love to go for a swim and a dip at some of these locations based on the pictures you guys are sending in. So it is really, it is really a puzzle. And I'm seeing there are more questions popping in. Is any specific, does water get more bacteria showing up? I know that Cobb's Creek tends to have a worse reputation, And I'll say that because I don't know for sure, but if you go, if you look at CSO Cast, it's CSOCAST.org, I believe. It's a website that has a map of all the combined sewer overflows in Philadelphia, and it's supposed to show you which have overflowed within the last 72 hours. Any waterway that is next to or has a CSO that flows into it should be unsafe within 72 hours of a rainstorm. So what a CSO is a combined sewer overflow. So after a rainstorm, in Philadelphia and many old cities on the East Coast, the sewers were not large enough to handle rain flow, or like when there were rainstorms, the sewers and the stormwater management combine, and so raw sewage flows into the stormwater management and directly into the waterways, to the tune of somewhere around 15 million gallons of raw sewage entering the Delaware annually. And a lot of that is directly into Cobbs Creek, and some of it is into Darby Creek. So it is at those locations where it is the least safe after storms. The timing of it is a little unclear. How big the storm needs to be to trigger the CSO system, I don't know. So a lot of it is reputation based. There are other researchers in Philadelphia, and they're heavily monitored. I just don't know the answer to safety and bacterial counts. But those are heavily monitored, and the answers are out there, to not sound too much like a sci-fi a sci-fi answer, like somebody knows it's not me. But yeah.
Can I make a comment, Lauren?
Yeah, absolutely.
In regard to what you were just talking about, let's remember that in Delaware County, we do not have a combined sewer system, freshwater and sanitary. We have sanitary sewers.
Mm-hmm.
Sanitary sewers run along the stream, run along the waterway naturally because it has to lose elevation. So when those sanitary sewers develop leaking or infiltration or anything, that becomes a problem. And that some people feel that especially becomes a problem when people like aqua water systems are privatized. So if you are hearing about Del Coro, which is the publicly financed basically sewer system in this region, think about what privatization would do, how the people who privatize are into it for their own benefit, let's say, for their own wealth. So if you have a chance to say good things about Del Coro, Delaware County sewage, and bad things about Aqua is the one who makes the money, and they would be reluctant to put as much resources as the public sources. Thank you for that, Ruth. One thing that I would say about the making dams in the creek is that is not nearly as serious as people removing rocks from the shoreline, right? Mm-hmm. to build their dams for obvious reasons. The shoreline becomes vulnerable to huge erosion, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there is a lot that goes hand in hand with the littering. I think there's a lack of understanding and respect for the environment when people are manipulating spaces, especially spaces where they're a guest, like a stream. leaving litter, pulling rocks out of the shoreline or out of the creek. I don't think a lot of people understand actually the impact that they're having. And I know, especially in like the park system, there's like the national parks, there's signs everywhere not to build cairns in creeks, because it is really disruptive and you have to break them down, and it's a whole thing. Even though it's beautiful art and it feels transient, it is disruptive. And I think that there is the same sort of lack of perception when people come to have a good time, cool off, have a fun Saturday afternoon where they're just relaxing, and then they leave not thinking about the impact that they've left behind for everybody else who either lives there permanently as a stream resident or lives near the stream that has to deal with the impact of the litter, and the erosion that comes after. But well, this has been a fantastic discussion. And Ivan, I see your comment. I think that maybe CSOs might need to be one of our discussions in the future, especially bacteria and CSOs, now that we're venturing into the world of nitrates, because the nitrogen conversation and the nutrients and bacteria go hand in hand. So I've noted, and I think maybe that will be a delightfully disgusting conversation, maybe for our December gathering, as we have our potluck. I think that sounds festive. But I believe we're well over time. Thank you all for sticking it out with me. You all have been just an absolute joy. Our next meeting is October 26th. It's a Saturday. It'll be at John Hines National Wildlife Refuge. As a reminder, as an enticement, new hats, new supplies, new test kits, maybe a guy named Eric who's going to talk about mussels. It's going to be a great time. If you can't be there, that's okay. I'll still make sure you get all the good stuff. Let me know. We'll be sending out the recording of this conversation, as well as several opportunities to provide feedback on survey after survey. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, for joining us in this conversation. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your summer. Don't forget to sample. And I will see you all hopefully in the stream soon. So
Lauren, what kind of ice cream will be served at the John Hines?
Ooh, what kind of ice cream will be served? I'm feeling that horchata ice cream sounds good, and Susan Lee might have to pick us up a pint of that truffle.
The salted caramel. Maybe we'll have a selection from Handel's and all sample some. Like that could be easily arranged.
Yeah, and there were several people who said chocolate chip mint. So I think, yeah, we might have to do a tasting menu. I don't think I have any ice cream in my freezer now, and I'm regretting that because I'm very hungry.
For the 26th, Lauren, is that going to be morning or afternoon, or do we have a range just so we can block it off on a if we?
That's a great question. We do have a time range. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Aurora,
it is in the morning. I want to say it's I think it's like 9:30 to 11:30 or 9 to 11.
So we can just
like that. It's definitely morning.
block off the morning just so we